My sister's baby shower turned into a nightmare when she exposed this shocking secret. Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here we are. For context, I'm Karen, 32, and up until 6 months ago, I was happily married. My husband, James, and I had built a beautiful life together. We had our struggles, but I truly believed we were solid. Then, one night, everything changed. James was in a car accident. The impact was so severe that he died instantly. There was no chance to say goodbye. No final words. Just a sudden, violent end to everything we had built. Grief is strange. Some days, it lurks in the background. Other days, it rips through you like it just happened. I went through the motions planning the funeral, handling paperwork, pretending I was holding it together when people told me to stay strong. But inside, I was drowning. James left me everything, our house, an apartment downtown, the savings we had built together. Financially, I was secure, but it didn't make the loss any easier. At first, my family stepped up. They checked in on me, invited me over for dinner, and for the first time in my life, my parents felt like parents. Then my younger sister, Sarah, showed up, 7 months pregnant, and suddenly, I stopped existing. Sarah has always been the golden child, the one my parents adored, the one who got away with everything. No matter what I accomplished, she was the center of attention. After James's death, I thought things had shifted. For once, my parents prioritized me. They asked about my well-being. They even mentioned struggling financially, so I started sending them $1,500 a month to help. I didn't hesitate. It felt good to support them. Then Sarah returned, and I was invisible again. Conversations revolved around her pregnancy, her cravings, her nursery plans, her every mood swing. My grief was an afterthought. At first, I ignored it. They were excited about their first grandchild. It made sense. But Sarah kept smirking at me across the table, like she was waiting for something. It wasn't exciting. It was calculated. At her baby shower, she finally revealed what she had been hiding. A few weeks before the event, Sarah called, acting unusually sweet. She insisted that she had a special surprise planned and that she wanted me there. I felt uneasy, but I ignored it. I showed up with carefully wrapped gifts, a handmade blanket, and a high-end baby monitor. It didn't matter how overlooked I felt. I still wanted to be a good sister. The place was packed. Pastel decorations covered every inch of the room, and my parents were practically glowing. Then, Sarah stood up, tapped her glass, and smiled in my direction. My stomach twisted. She announced it was time to reveal the father of her baby. The moment stretched, the tension unbearable. Then she said his name. James. My late husband. The room fell apart. Whispers, gasps, shocked expressions. I barely heard any of it. My mind refused to process the words. Sarah's expression was smug, waiting for me to react. Then, as if publicly humiliating me wasn't enough, she added another blow. As James's only living heir, her baby was entitled to half of his estate, his money, his properties, everything he left behind. My parents stood beside her, nodding in agreement. That was when I understood. They had known all along. I didn't remember leaving. One moment, I was standing there, my heart pounding. The next, I was outside, gasping for air, hands shaking too badly to even pull out my phone. I had to get out. If I had stayed, I would have screamed. That night, I sat in my house, surrounded by wedding photos, trying to process everything. Then my phone started buzzing. Dozens of messages. Screenshots. Sarah had sent me texts from James, love letters, late-night chats, plans for a future with her. They had been together for months. While I was undergoing fertility treatments, blaming myself for not getting pregnant, he was with her. While I was mourning him, Sarah was plotting to take everything from me. And my parents helped her. The next morning, they called. They didn't apologize. There was no guilt, no remorse. They told me to do the right thing and hand over half of my inheritance. Something inside me snapped. For months, I had grieved a man who had betrayed me. I had believed my family finally cared. Now, they expected me to surrender everything to the woman who destroyed my marriage. They had no idea who they were dealing with, because I wasn't just going to refuse. I was going to make them regret ever coming for me. I ignored their calls, not just for a day, but for as long as it took for them to realize I wasn't giving in. For the first time, I stopped chasing their approval. They made their choice, and now I was making mine. I wasn't going to argue with them over the phone. I was going to fight them where it mattered. My first call was to Rachel, the lawyer who had handled James's estate. I didn't hold back. I told her everything: Sarah's public stunt at the baby shower, her claims on my inheritance, the text proving her affair with James. She listened without interrupting, flipping through the estate documents before giving me a knowing look. They don't have a case. James's will was ironclad. Every asset, every dollar, was legally mine. Even if Sarah's baby was biologically his, the law wouldn't change what was written. She and my parents had been banking on my guilt, assuming I'd roll over and hand everything over just to keep the peace. They wanted to believe I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. Rachel didn't just confirm that I had nothing to worry about legally, she moved fast to secure my assets. Protections were put in place on my properties. Legal blocks were set up on my accounts. A cease and desist order was sent, warning Sarah and my parents that any further attempts to publicly attack me would result in legal consequences. This wasn't just about protecting my inheritance. This was about making sure they couldn't touch me. 2 days later, my mother called again. I let it go to voicemail. Her tone was ice cold, accusing me of being the one tearing the family apart. She claimed I was overreacting, that Sarah was just trying to do what was best for her child. Then, at the end of the message, she slipped up. She warned me that if I didn't do the right thing, I would regret it. Not a plea, a threat. That confirmed what I already suspected. They were planning something. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and messages. Sarah had gone public. She posted a long, overly dramatic Facebook post, painting herself as a struggling mother carrying her late brother-in-law's baby, while being cruelly denied his inheritance. The comments section was out of control. Some people were in shock, trying to process what they had just read. Others immediately jumped to her defense, calling me selfish and cruel for keeping James's assets to myself. Sarah knew exactly how to manipulate people. She framed herself as a helpless mother being denied stability for her unborn child. The way she spun it, I wasn't just keeping my inheritance, I was taking food from her baby's mouth. The damage spread fast. Family members started chiming in, siding with her as if I had stolen something. Aunts, cousins, and relatives I hadn't spoken to in years took her side without hesitation. None of them reached out to me directly. They saw a post and decided I was the villain. Rachel called me the moment she saw it. She was furious. We warned them. They ignored it. Now it's time to show them why that was a mistake. She wasn't talking about money. She was talking about taking them down publicly and legally. And I was ready. Rachel moved fast. She sent Sarah a formal legal notice, making it clear that if she continued spreading lies, there would be legal consequences. Then, we took the next step. This wasn't just about shutting Sarah down. It was about making sure everyone knew the truth. I made one post. No exaggerations. No drama. Just the facts. Sarah had publicly announced her affair with my husband at her baby shower, humiliating me in front of our family. She had been involved with him while I was undergoing fertility treatments, and I was blaming myself for not conceiving. I attached screenshots, James's texts, Sarah's messages after his death, the proof that she had been planning to take my inheritance. Then, I ended it with a simple statement. This is the woman demanding my home, my money, and my life. This is the truth. I turned off comments. No arguments. No debates. The evidence spoke for itself. The fallout was instant. Relatives who had defended Sarah suddenly disappeared. The ones who had called me selfish started backtracking. She had spent weeks spinning a false story, expecting me to stay silent. Now, her entire narrative had collapsed. Sarah deleted her original post within an hour. Then, she disappeared. My parents weren't as quiet. My mother called, furious that I had aired family business online. She didn't deny the affair. She didn't ask how I felt. She accused me of making Sarah look bad when she was just trying to do what's best for her child. I let her talk. Then, when she finished, I told her exactly what I should have said years ago. We're done. No more visits. No more calls. I wouldn't be sending them another dime. My father tried to intervene, claiming I was being unreasonable. I reminded him that they had already made their choice. And so had I. Then, I hung up. Rachel made sure everything was locked down. Sarah had no legal claim. She could fight all she wanted, but the law was on my side. She had spent months scheming to take everything from me. Now, she had nothing. The last message she sent wasn't an apology. She accused me of ruining the family and claimed I'd regret cutting ties when her child grew up without an aunt. She wanted me to feel guilty. I blocked her instead. For the first time since James died, I felt something I hadn't in months. Relief. They expected me to give in. Instead, I walked away. And I never looked back. Cutting them off should have been the end of it. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had lost the inheritance battle, lost the public sympathy, and lost her chance to manipulate me. But instead of accepting the consequences of her actions, she decided to play her final card, revenge. And she went straight for the only thing she had left. Lies. It started small. A few distant relatives sent vague, guilt-tripping messages, trying to convince me to work things out. I ignored them. Then, I started hearing from people outside the family. Old family friends, mutual acquaintances, people who had no reason to be involved suddenly had opinions. That's when I knew Sarah had started spreading a new version of the story. She wasn't claiming James's inheritance anymore. She was rewriting the past. Sarah's new lie was simple. According to her, James and I had been separated before he died. She painted herself as the woman he truly loved, the one he had intended to be with, while I was just a bitter ex refusing to accept reality. The implication was clear. She wanted people to believe I was the other woman in my marriage, that I had taken everything that should have gone to her and their child. It was disgusting. And it worked. The rumors spread. I lost friends who believed her. Some people didn't bother reaching out, just quietly disappeared from my life. Others messaged me, accusing me of keeping James's child from his real family. Rachel was livid. She immediately advised me to sue for defamation, but I hesitated. Dragging this into court meant more time, more energy, more of my life wasted on them. I didn't want a legal battle. I just wanted to be free of them. So, I took a different approach. I reached out to one person Sarah had completely forgotten about. James's best friend, Mark. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. Mark had seen everything firsthand, the real state of my marriage, the lies Sarah had told, and the messages James had sent before he died. And unlike Sarah, he had no reason to lie. I explained everything to him, and within a day, he handled it. Mark publicly called Sarah out in a way I never could. He posted old messages, shared private conversations, exposed every detail she had conveniently left out. He confirmed that James had never planned to leave me, that Sarah had been nothing more than an affair he regretted, that he had never intended for her to have anything. He even posted James's last messages, the ones where he admitted he had made a mistake, that he had planned to cut Sarah off, that he had no intention of leaving his wife. It was brutal, and it worked. Sarah disappeared overnight. The backlash was instant. People who had blindly defended her suddenly turned on her. The sympathy she had weaponized dried up in an instant. Even some of my relatives, the ones who had jumped on her side without question, tried to reach out. I ignored every single one of them. They had believed her lies when it was convenient. Now, they could live with the consequences. Rachel called me later, impressed. You handled it better than any lawsuit would have. And she was right. Sarah had destroyed her reputation. Now, she had to live with it. Sarah's public downfall should have been enough to keep her quiet. But instead of admitting defeat, she doubled down. She couldn't claim James's inheritance anymore. She couldn't twist the truth in her favor. She had lost every shred of credibility she once had. So she turned to desperation. And that made her reckless. It started with blocked numbers. Random calls, always late at night. No voicemails, no messages. Just repeated attempts to get through. Then came the fake accounts. Social media profiles with generic names and 0 followers suddenly started commenting on my posts, sending vague, threatening messages. Most of them were easy to trace back to Sarah. Same wording, same passive-aggressive tone, same obsession with what I owed her. At first, I ignored it. But then, it escalated. One evening, I got home and found a letter taped to my door. No postage, no return address. Just a folded piece of paper with 4 words written in shaky handwriting. You took everything. Pay. I stood there, staring at it for a long time. The message itself wasn't surprising. Sarah had made it clear that she felt entitled to my life. But the fact that she had been physically near my home? That changed everything. I called Rachel immediately. She didn't hesitate. We're filing for a restraining order. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was harassment. And I wasn't about to wait for it to get worse. The legal process moved fast. Rachel compiled every single incident, the online threats, the fake accounts, the late-night calls, the letter. It was more than enough for a judge to issue a protective order against Sarah. The moment she was served, the silence was instant. No more calls. No more messages. Nothing. It was over. My parents, of course, were furious. They called, ranting about how I was ruining Sarah's life, how I was taking things too far. As if Sarah hadn't spent months trying to take everything from me. As if I was supposed to keep forgiving her no matter what she did. I hung up on them. And for the first time, I felt no guilt. Sarah had spent months trying to destroy me. Now, she was officially out of my life. And I wasn't about to let her back in. For a while, everything was quiet. No calls, no messages, no random letters on my door. It felt like the storm had passed, like Sarah had finally realized she couldn't win. Then, I got a call from CPS. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I don't have kids, I don't babysit, and I don't even have younger relatives in my care. But they had received an anonymous report claiming I was neglecting a child in my home. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. It was Sarah. She couldn't get my money, so now she was trying to ruin my life in other ways. Rachel handled it before I even had to stress about it. The CPS caseworker took one look at the situation and shut it down immediately. There was no investigation, no follow-up, just an official note in their system that the claim was false. That should have been enough to make Sarah stop. But she wasn't finished. A week later, my job called me into a meeting. HR had received anonymous emails claiming I had stolen money, harassed a pregnant woman, and created a hostile work environment. The emails made it sound serious, like they had evidence. Except they didn't, because none of it was true. HR asked me if I had any idea who might be targeting me. I gave them a copy of my restraining order. Meeting over. The fake accusations disappeared just as fast as they had come in. Sarah was getting sloppy, and I was done playing defense. Rachel filed a formal legal action against Sarah. This time, it wasn't just a warning. She was going to pay for every lie, every false report, every attempt to ruin my life. I wasn't just blocking her out anymore. I was making sure she could never pull this on anyone else again. Filing the lawsuit was the final step. Sarah had spent months trying to take everything from me, my home, my money, my reputation. She had humiliated me at her baby shower, spread lies, faked reports, and even tried to get me fired. And now, she was about to face real consequences. Rachel made sure everything was airtight. The lawsuit covered defamation, harassment, and false legal claims. Sarah wasn't just dealing with a slap on the wrist. If she didn't settle, she'd be facing serious financial damages. The moment she was served, the panic set in. I expected her to lash out, to try and play the victim again. Instead, she went silent. Her posts stopped. The fake accounts disappeared. For the first time since this all started, she wasn't running her mouth. She was scared. A few weeks later, I got a call from my parents. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. My mother's voice was strained, like she had been crying. She told me Sarah was struggling, that she had no money, no one left to help her, and that I needed to let this go. I laughed. She didn't care when Sarah was trying to ruin my life. She didn't care when I was the one struggling. Now, when the consequences were finally hitting her favorite daughter, suddenly it was my responsibility to fix it. I told her the same thing she told me at the baby shower. You should support your sister. Then, I hung up. A month later, Sarah settled. She agreed to a public retraction of her false claims, legally admitted to fabricating the CPS report and workplace complaints, and paid damages to cover my legal fees. She lost everything. I haven't spoken to her since. My parents tried reaching out a few more times, but I ignored them. They chose their side, and I chose mine. Sarah thought she could take my life. Now, she doesn't even have one of her own, and I have never felt more at peace.